Smile. Right. I'll take it. Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everyone here tonight. Before we get underway, I'm just going to start us off with the karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E he aki ana te atakura. He tio, he hoka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. No mai ngā hua, no mai ngā pai, no mai kia nui. Kia hāwera ai. Thank you all for joining us here tonight. Wāhine mā and our singular tane in the room. We're really excited to invite you all into our office space and also to our guests who are joining us here online. I hope you've got a good view of our wonderful panel. My name is Sheila. I am going to be your MC tonight, but my job is very, very brief. I'm just going to go through a few safety procedures before we get underway, and then I'm going to be handing over to our panel. I know you're all excited to hear from these wonderful wāhine mā that I have up here alongside me. For those of you who have joined us kanohi ki te kanohi in the office today, no mai haere mai. We want to keep you safe and happy while you're here. So if you have any questions, I have a few. I want to mihi to my support event staff that we have tonight, who you can send your pārtai concerns to. So I've got Julia up here at the front, Caroline at the back, and we've got Georgia and Jade somewhere as well, who are standing at the door, I think, waiting for any stragglers to come in. So if you have any concerns, please seek them out. They'll be able to help you. If you are needing the wharepaku, it is just outside of the office space, down the corridor to the left. Please, throughout the event, if you need to get up and you need to use the toilet, if you want to have some kai that we've put behind you or fill up your drink in our kitchen area, please feel free to do so. You're not trapped in your seat. We want you to feel happy while we're going through our discussion tonight. In the unlikely event of an emergency, a reminder that you probably don't know, so not a reminder, but our emergency exits are located in the same foyer as the wharepaku. So we have two stairwells that you will go down through. Our wonderful floor wardens will don their bright vests and you'll be able to follow them out. Please remember to keep calm, ka mau te muri, like we want to get out safely all together. In the event of an earthquake, I'm sure we all know, drop, cover and hold. And if it's long and strong, we're going to get gone. So those, I think, are all we need to know around our emergency, kaupapa. If you are needing to access the leave the building or access the building during this talk, the Aon Centre building doors close at 6 p.m. So come and see one of the wāhine that I pointed out before, and we'll be able to help you get in and out of the building. And I think that about covers us. So I'm going to now introduce Margaret Cooney, who is the Secretariat for Mana Wāhine, and a mihi to you, Margaret. Thank you for allowing us to co-host this event. It's really exciting. I'll pass over to you, and then I'll introduce the Sarah.
Yeah, well, hopefully following Sina's great act of keeping things brief, I just wanted to say a big thank you to the EA for their support in hosting this, and I know the effort required to kind of coordinate things and put an event on, especially when you've got a day job and consultation papers and responses to get out the door. So thanks so much, but also the support for this effort that has really come from a groundswell of women across the electricity sector, started about 4 years ago, and really wanting to promote the exceptional talent that we've got in the industry. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from the team at the EA about how you're viewing diversity and how it's going to support us in this energy transition, because ultimately the more diverse we are, the more likely we're going to serve our communities. And also when there's such a war on talent, and we know full well that gender doesn't dictate talent, it's great to be able to promote more diversity in the sector. So thanks again to the EA team, and look forward to hearing the discussion, and excuse me for ducking out slightly earlier, but yeah, thanks.
Margaret. I'm going to make my exit as well. I'm going to introduce you to our wonderful Chief Executive, the leader of our waka, and she is going to lead the rest of the conversation. I will come back up at the end to close with karakia, but that's it for me now. All right, so I'll hand over to you, lovely ladies. There are 4 seats at the front if anybody can't hear it in the back, so please come and join us up here.
Now meeting you, Zena and Margaret, and welcome everyone. It is fantastic to have everyone here. It's great to have so many of you in the room, and it's great to have what looks like quite a few people online. That's awesome. There's lots of you, so we're really excited to be able to host this event. This is the first time we've hosted anything external in our new office. I say new, but actually we've been here since July last year. So pretty exciting to be able to open our doors and welcome you into our tare. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to this amazing panel of Wāhine who are sitting up here with me. But I thought first I'd just start with a few comments really about why we're here. So the kaupapa of Mana Wāhine is to guide next generation leaders of the energy industry and to amplify diverse voices. And that's something that I'm personally really passionate about. And I'd really like to thank Mana Wāhine for allowing us to co-host this event tonight. I'm sure lots of you have attended other Mana Wāhine events. I've certainly been to a few, and I found that each time there's something really interesting that I learn, and I gain some new perspectives and some skills to put into my kete, and I think that's the plan for tonight. So hopefully we'll be able to share some things with you, and you'll all gain something from the discussion tonight. So the focus of our kōrero tonight is on leadership and the experiences that we've had as women in the energy sector and beyond, because some of us have worked in other sectors. And so I think there'll be some interesting things that the panel will be able to share about their experiences through their career. It's also an opportunity for us to talk a little bit about the authority's vision for the future. And if you attended Downstream this year, you will have heard me talk a little bit about that already. If we sort of zoom out, what this vision is about a low carbon, efficient, dynamic and secure electricity system, which empowers consumers to maximise the benefits of electricity. And I think that's probably something that all of us across the industry can identify with. But I want to zoom in and put the focus a little bit on what's directly in front of us and the things that will provide the foundation for us getting to that vision. So the Electricity Authority, Te Mana Hiko, we are the regulator. So our role is interesting and quite special, and we have a few things that we need to do to be able to help support the things that are going on in the industry. So one of the things we need to do is to stay ahead of the environment, to ensure that the rules are fit for purpose and that they act as an enabler rather than a barrier to change and progress. We need to also look at the rules that we've got in place already and think about how those might need to change with the changes that are going on in the industry. One of the things that I'm really focused on is leveraging data and insights to guide us in the work that we do. And if you heard me speak at Downstream, you'll know that we have a lot of really interesting and complex challenges and issues to work through as a sector, and we need to think differently and creatively about how we can address those issues. So when I think about all those things that we need to do, for me, I think this can only be achieved if we all work together. And it's not easy to make the changes that we need to make, and it takes quite a bit of time, but we don't have a lot of time. So we are working really hard to think about how we can do things differently. And I think what's really important about that and how it relates to why we're here tonight is that for us to be able to do things differently, we can't do it on our own. And we need a wide group of people involved to be able to bring, a wide set of experience and skills, both in the sector, but also within the Electricity Authority as well. And that diversity of skills and experience, for me, really aligns with what Mana Wāhine is about. So it's a really nice alignment and a great opportunity for us to think about how we're doing things differently. And I'm really lucky that I have a really incredible team of kaimahi who work alongside me here at the Authority. Some of them are up here, but others are in the room, and there are plenty more, some online and others who couldn't be here tonight. And we have a team of people who are really knowledgeable, experienced and passionate about the work they do in the sector. I've also recently welcomed some new people onto my leadership team, including Airihi, who I'm really excited to introduce tonight, and I'm hoping that you'll have the opportunity to be able to have a bit of a conversation and ask some questions. I also think it's worth just reflecting a little bit on leadership, and for me, leadership isn't just about people on a leadership team, but it's about all of us and all the different roles that we play in the organisations we work in. And I have, in my career, been really fortunate to work for some fantastic leaders. I worked it out, it's probably pretty much 50% women that I've worked for in my career. And I think that might be, maybe that's unusual. Maybe for some of you that's very unusual. Maybe for others of you that hasn't been that unusual. But it did get me thinking about the change that has gone on even in the space of my career. And also I think that leadership isn't just about the managers that you work for, but it's about everybody around you, and looking beyond those kind of traditional leadership roles into your whānau, your friends, and your peers as well. And one of the things I often joke about is that if you've ever been my manager at any time, it is a job for life. A lot of people don't realise they've signed on for that, but I do for them. And I think that's, that network is something that can be really, really powerful as we continue to develop in our careers. So as I said, over the course of my career, I've noticed increasing diversity, but I think we still have a bit of a way to go, which is partly what this conversation is about. But I do think we have seen quite a bit of change, and even in the time that I've been in the energy sector, I've noticed quite a lot of increase in diversity in some of the leadership roles. So that's an interesting reflection. I also wanted to acknowledge the recent panel that was at the Downstream conference, where a number of senior women in the industry spoke, and also particularly to acknowledge Rebecca Osborne, who talked about the background to Mana Wāhine and what an important initiative it was. And it's really fantastic to see how many people are supporting and getting involved. So I'm really proud to be part of this kōrero tonight, celebrating some of the incredible wāhine that I work with every day and continuing the work to amplify diverse voices in our industry. I also want to acknowledge that we don't, even this group, we don't represent a full spectrum of the voices that need to be heard and amplified, and that most of the whakaaro we'll share tonight will be our own personal thoughts and experience. I think we've got lots to learn from each other, and I'm really keen to encourage and support more opportunities like this to have a conversation. When I spoke at Downstream, I shared a whakatauki, which I think is really, really helpful. So I thought I'd share it again tonight. E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi, engari he toa takitini. And that means my strength is not of an individual, but that of the collective. I consider myself really lucky to be part of a collective of 100 or so individuals who make up the Electricity Authority, and particularly there's wāhine tonight that I'd like to introduce you to. So the format is going to be that I've got a few questions for them, but I'd really love to hear your questions. So I'll try and make sure I will make sure I leave plenty of time for you to ask questions. I know we are able to take questions from people online as well as people in the room, so please do have a think, but I will kick it off. So what I'm going to do is ask each person to
my career, I worked mostly in transmission, a couple of years in distribution, and a couple of years with a consultancy. Early this year, I thought, let me make a change to the other side, and but I still love the electricity sector, so I've moved to the regulator side. 5 months on, and I'm still smiling. Amazing here, and yeah, that's me.
Ko Wāhine, ko Airihi Mahuika tō koingoa, he uri a hau no Ngāti Porou. I am Airihi, I whakapapa to Ngāti Porou, as do my 4 tamariki. The this role is a return to the electricity sector for me after quite some time. Although I can say that I've been in infrastructure now for about 20 years, I think. And I've been both regulated on the regulated side and the regulator. And it's a fun industry, so I'm pleased to be back and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Kia ora, I'm Sylvie Zantza. I come from Greece. I am mother to 2 teenage children. I have a legal and policy background, been in New Zealand about 10 years now, and a year working in the authority, first time being part of the infrastructure in the electricity sector. And yes, I feel very, very privileged to be part of this panel and to be here with you tonight.
Tēnā koutou katoa, or Nicki Crauford, aho. I am the chair of the authority. I chair the board. I'm a professional director these days, but my background is in engineering, chemical engineering originally. And then I have spent quite a long time in the sector, nearly 10 years at Transpower. I was also a director of Genesis Energy, Orion, and Pioneer Energy. So quite a long experience, long time in the sector. Really enjoyed being at the Electricity Authority and the challenges that we currently face in terms of encompassing the move to a low carbon future.
All right, thank you. So I'll start with some questions, and I'm going to start with you, Nicki. As the board chair, can you tell us a little bit about what the authority's vision means for you and how you see us achieving this over the coming years?
Just a little question. How long have I got? I think, I guess the way I see it and the way I have seen it ever since I joined here is that everything we do is about helping the energy sector move towards a low carbon future. And as I see it, we do that in 2 different ways. The first is supporting the electricity sector to become more decarbonised, introducing more renewables and so forth. But the second is preparing the electricity sector for decarbonisation of the rest of the energy sector and therefore the additional new generation that needs to come into the electricity sector, which will mean massive changes to the sector. All of that, of course, whilst trying to keep the lights on. That's always a good thing, particularly in a year when you have an election. I think we're very lucky in New Zealand. We have an excellent foundation, and that is the market that has, I think, served New Zealand as well for the last 25 odd years. However, I think it needs to change. It needs to change quite profoundly. It needs to be reinforced. It needs to be strengthened, and we need to guide some of those changes. I really wanted to talk about 2 in particular that I'm particularly excited about. The first is the challenge of increasing demand-side participation. Consumers will have much more of a say in the electricity market than they have had in the past. I think that's very exciting. I think it will benefit consumers. The Electricity Authority is all about what we can do for consumers. So I think this is a really important aspect of reducing the overall costs of the transition to a low carbon future, but also providing benefit to consumers. But I think one of our roles is to maximise that, but also to understand what does that mean in terms of a change to the market. There will be changes. I think we're still coming to grips with what that means. It will no longer be a market that's dominated by a few supply side generators. There will be hundreds and thousands of participants in the market. How do we accommodate that? What does that mean? What does that mean for rule changes? What does that mean for how we operate the market. I think we're still coming to grips with that. I think that's really exciting. I think the other thing that I find exciting, if not scary, is the transition to a low carbon future, and what the increased and intermittent generation means for the market and how we deal with that. So the move to renewables and what that means, it's already, things are moving faster than we had anticipated 5 years ago. So as a regulator, I think, Sarah, you touched on this, as a regulator, we need to change as well. The role that my predecessors had, the role that the authority had 5 years ago is not the same as the role as it has now. We have to move much more quickly. We still have to make very robust decisions. We will not be thanked for getting things wrong. But we also have to think about actually how do we bring the industry with us? How do we work together as a sector? And how do we make robust, rapid, agile decisions? Sarah also talked a little about building the capacity and the capability within the organisation. That will really be a focus for both of us for this year. It's difficult. We are a relatively small agency, and not everybody likes to work for the regulator. I have no idea why. And I think somehow kind of everybody thinks of the regulator as someone who stops us doing things. But we don't. Actually, we help you do things. We help the sector. We support the sector to move to a low carbon future. That's our role. So we need to change that reputation, and we need to build to have some of the best people within the sector working for us to help that support service. I'll leave it there.
Right. I think that's a really nice segue to one of the best people from the sector, Sheila, who, as Sheila said, she's joined us recently, having spent a long career in the sector. So one of the things that you've come to do is to work on the Future Security and Resilience Program, which is a very important piece of work for us. And I think following on from what Nicki said, it would be really helpful if you could talk a little bit about that work and how it will help us to lift our vision.
Sure. I first want to just let Nicki know it's also working for the regulator.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm going to do my plug here. Yeah, I was 19 years with Transpower, and I was actually looking, for something slightly different, but still within the sector. So it's really good. So sorry, coming back to your question. The objective of our team for the Future Security and Resilience, as the name suggests, is to ensure, and as Sarah and Nicki have talked about it, this transition to low carbon emissions. So the Electricity Authority and the code that comes with it was, kind of done in the early 2000s, 2010, when the authority came into existence. And at that time, it was a simpler power system. Power flow was unidirectional. It was just one way. It was quite relatively easy to work with, and that was what the code was based on. However, now we've got all these, distributed energy resources coming onto the power system. It's really cool stuff, new technologies, and the code is not quite fit for purpose. So a lot of the work my team does is to ensure that we can review and revise the code in the parts that can enable the new technologies and, make those technical challenges workable. So yeah, that's what our team does. So we are here to help, and we publish papers, and that's how we engage with all the stakeholders. So we don't sit and make decisions on our own.
Thanks, Sheila. I think one of the things that, was sort of wrapped up in some of the work that we're doing and thinking about the future and our vision also is that many of you will know that the authority had an additional piece added to its statutory objective. which came into force on the 31st of December last year. So Sylvie, you and your team in particular, so across the organisation we have a focus on consumers, but you and your team in particular have a focus on consumers, and there's a lot happening in the space. So maybe you could highlight one piece of work that you have on your plate right now that is about that new objective.
So I forgot to tell you before, I'm a principal analyst in the retail networks team market policy. So following an EPR recommendation, back like a couple of years ago, the authority stepped up and developed the consumer care guidelines. But now, 2 years after that event, the authorizing environment has changed, and it's time to, have another look. And, we have our new statutory objective now, so it's time for us to look how we can strengthen and update the consumer care guidelines. And this is an, really, focus of the team, alongside work for the distribution networks that Nicki referred to right before. And again, with a consumer focus, yes, it is about the networks, but it is about consumers as well. So that's it. 2 major pieces of work in the team, all consumer focused.
Thanks, Sylvie. Okay, so we have talked a little bit about changes that are going on at the moment, and as Airihi mentioned, she was at the Electricity Commission quite a few years ago. So Airihi, listening to some of that, and I guess you're, what is it, week 3?
Yeah, started week 3.
Started week 3. So it'd be really interesting to hear from you. What are the biggest changes you're noticing as you kind of left the Commission and came back to the authority?
The more relevant question might be what's still the same, but there's been so many changes that there was last year, but obviously some core things remain the same. Security of supply is still a really important thing. But what strikes me, which I think is the same in infrastructure, other infrastructure industries, is the pace of change of technology and how that influences things. I read an article on Stuff the other day, and it talked about airgen, how you can extract mercury and create electricity, which is so cool. But that, of course, also drives our need for electricity, security of supply. And it's a platform for so many other things, health, education, economic growth, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, you have climate change coming along, which is a challenge for everybody, how we make our infrastructure, including electricity, more resilient, and we adapt to change. So that's on the challenge side. But I think on what's on the exciting side is the move to decarbonisation, renewables, and being able to be part of that story. So I find that really exciting. And just on the diversity and inclusion perspective, I mean, in 20 years, I do look around the authority, and their faces all look different. There's a lot more variety, and I think it's not just diversity in the people working here, but also in becoming more senior roles, having more diversity. And it's great to have at the authority Wāhine that are our CE and chair, which I think are great role models for demonstrating women embracing leadership and also being able to deal with a complex sector environment.
Nicki, you've been, as you said, in the energy sector for a while. What has been a highlight for you through that time, and what things are we doing well as a sector?
I think I just reinforce what Airihi has just said. That I joined the energy sector in the mid-90s when I joined Transpire, so it's a very long time ago for some people around here. In fact, there are at least a couple of people who were still who were there when I started back in those times. So I'm not alone. I know that. Although I do feel very old sometimes sort of looking at some of the younger faces around here. There weren't many women in the energy sector then, certainly not at senior levels. And I can remember when I went on maternity leave, and they didn't quite know what to do. And I have to say Transpower did a fantastic job. I went on maternity leave a couple of times, and each time I came back and they promoted me, so that was great. But it was certainly, there were not many women in those days, and it is lovely to see far more. I still think we have a way to go in terms of getting more women into senior levels, and I think we need to keep pushing, and we need to keep focus on diversity of all sorts, diversity of thought, diversity of race, diversity of gender as well. It's all really important. In terms of highlight, it's always a very exciting industry. There are always many changes, but at the same time, there are also some issues that I have worked on. One of the issues that I worked on right at the beginning of my career, I worked with Comelco on contracts. I worked on transmission pricing. I worked on real-time pricing. Some of these things actually come back again, and hopefully we're making progress. I actually think a highlight is that we are now all focused in one direction, and that is on a low-carbon future. I don't think that the sector has been quite so focused, single-mindedly focused on that as we are right now.
Now I've got some questions that are a little bit more kind of about aspects of your career and leadership. So maybe, Sheila, I'll just turn to you. Have there been barriers that you faced as a woman in the energy sector through your career? And if so, how did you overcome this?
Barriers, yeah. I think one of the single biggest barriers I faced was not being a woman or my race or anything. It was my own self-confidence. I didn't have it. I used to try my hardest, and I think it's still not good enough. But over time, I realized, no, I am not too bad. And so it was just my self-confidence. But it has you know, over time, it's definitely improved. I mean, I wouldn't have applied here. No, but seriously, it is. I've heard this thing about a job being advertised and a woman tending to look at it and seeing 10 things, and they can only do 7, and then they'll think, no, I can't apply. It's not going to work. And that's not true. For any of you that think that, please, if you can do 5 of it, and if you can actually convince the person doing the interview that you've got the passion and you can do the remaining 5, that's a good interview. They'll see that. So yeah, I encourage you to do that, because that was my biggest barrier, was my confidence. And you know, if I did not take 10 out of 10, I would not apply for the role. What's self-improvement? Thank you.
And are there things? Oh yeah.
Sorry, can I challenge you with a question?
Sure.
Because don't you think though that the environment you were in, either within the industry or the company you were in, or at the job interview, did play a role in either fueling your confidence or shutting it down?
Yeah, possibly. But I think at the end, we need to work on that. Yeah. I mean, engineering, we were 2 girls and 28 guys. You know, it starts thin. And, you know, I did have a good mentor. So I do encourage you, if you don't have one, to actually get one. So my mentor was someone that I met 22 years ago when I was in consultancy. He is now a really close friend, but a good mentor doesn't tell you what to do. They kind of talk it through so that you know what to do. And so, yeah, in a way, it was also, you know, where you are that can do that. That's true. But that's what I've got over the years, is that confidence to say, this is what I want to try. This is what I want to do. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I had a similar thought that, you know, what are the things that you can do a lot of people talk about, allyship or having supporters or having people who encourage you. I think lots of women talk about the experience of needing someone to give them a bit of a push to kind of take on challenges that help them build that confidence. And I do think about the importance of your the managers and the people that you work for. And I jokingly said that it's a job for life for anyone who's been my boss, but it is partly that, because those are the people that give you encouragement and help you build your confidence. So I do think that's a really important thing for those of us that are leaders to think about. Managers, I think we've all got the ability to be leaders, but if you're a manager, thinking about how you can help your people build their confidence and develop. And I guess that probably leads into a question I had for Airihi about leadership, and I guess I'm interested in thinking about what's important to you in a leader, and what do you think kind of good leadership looks like?
I think that it does segue quite nicely into it, because for me, good leadership is having somebody who is both that balance of supporting you when you need and help building up your confidence, making sure you've got the right tools or whatever around you, but also having that push when you need it, when I would like to sit back a bit, giving me a bit of a shove forward. I've found helpful, and also just someone you can be open and have those difficult conversations, whether it's like I'm struggling with this piece of work, or this is not going so well in my life at the moment. And I think having had a number of really good managers that supported me over my career, and also a little bit, telcos at least, even like 13, 14 years ago, the remote working was actually okay. So being able to juggle kids, family and work, but also not, when you start work, if you've had kids and when your kids start daycare and then they're like sick for 6 weeks and you just don't seem to appear at work, having people that I knew trusted me, that I would get the job done, that also really mattered to me. And I think without a good manager who trusts me, I can have open conversations with, and a bit of help from tech, I wouldn't have been able to have 4 kids and get the roles that I've had in my career.
Interesting. And just as you were saying that, I was also reflecting on the fact that yes, good managers, but also can be your peers, and even your team that reports to you can be a big source of support and encouragement as well. So I think it's a good thing for us all to reflect on how we can do that for people that we work with, as much as they can do that for us. I might have one more question for Sylvie, and then I might open up to get some questions, because I'm sure there are lots of questions out there in the room and also online. So just start thinking about your question while I ask Sylvie one more question. Sylvie, being a Wāhine, it's not the only identity that each of us hold. Are there any other parts of your identity that have had an impact, an important role to play in your career?
Yes, so I'm an immigrant. So in here, no friends, no bonds, New Zealand. So my job anchors me here and gives me a sense of purpose. It's really, really important. And the people I meet through my job. So that's one thing. And the other thing, maybe it's considered a disadvantage, but maybe not. I am a non-native speaker. So I did face a lot of discrimination. People said to my face, you interviewed better, your qualifications are better, but we are worried about your communications, so we will go with the New Zealand person. But I refuse to see myself as a victim of, discrimination or being disadvantaged. I'm thankful for the opportunities, and I brushed myself up and persevered. And what I can tell you, no one can stop you. Other people cannot stop you. The only person stopping you is yourself. They can slow you down, but you will get where you want. If you want it, you can do it.
That's okay. All right. Well, I think it's probably a good opportunity to open up some questions from the floor or online. I think if you're online, They put it in the chat. Is that right, Julia?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Oh, so any questions? Or have you got any online that you want to? Not yet. Okay.
So we've kind of spoken about how you can improve your own self-confidence and foster your own mentorship and look at opportunities and what kind of take much of it out of it. But on the other hand, do you see there's any kind of systematic things that are a continual problem? And you mentioned like when you have a good boss that sees your potential and encourages you, that's great. But in my experience, they're few and far between. So what happens when you get a boss who does see a diverse part of your personality, that then their mind actually does diminish your potential? Is the only option to move jobs? And when we see in the sector where we don't have enough good managers like that, what is the solution?
Having a picture with some thoughts in terms of and then you know, anyone else feel free to chip in. And you know, I think we've probably all worked for people that it doesn't quite gel. I've had those experiences. I've tended to take from it that I can probably learn from that too. But I don't think that's what you're really talking about. I think you're talking about a little bit more than that. I think what we can do about it. One of the things that I want to do about it as a leader is making sure that setting some standards and expectations of our leaders. So we've done quite a lot of work in this organisation on behaviours and how they bring, you know, so we have values. How do we bring life to those values? It's through behaviours. We've done a lot of work as an organisation in talking about that. And through that, we've tried to build a sense that we can all kind of call out behaviour that doesn't fit with our behaviours. And that takes a lot of work, right? And it doesn't happen overnight. So I'm not suggesting it's an easy solution, but I was really interested when we worked with some external people to support us in that. And we weren't the first people they'd done that kind of work with. So I think other organisations are really thinking about, you know, your behaviours and how you, you know, your expectations of leaders and of all of us. So I think that's part of it. But does anyone else have any other kind of?
I do, Sarah, if that's okay. I think back over my career, and I've been made redundant or lost a job at least 4 times. And I think that what you say, Sylvie, is really that actually people can that they can hold you back, but not long term. You have to find a way through, and I think. Often you won't get the ideal boss. They are few and far between. In an organisation though, you do need friends. You do need people who believe in you. You need people who are allies. They're not necessarily more senior than you. Some of them will be. Some of them will be the same level. Some of them will actually be more junior to you. You have to build those. So you have to build your reputation, but you build it not just with your manager, you build it with the organisation. And then take opportunities as they arise, or make those opportunities yourself if you can. And maybe if things get too bad, then you do have to resign. But I don't think you have to resign just because it's your boss who's not the right fit. Maybe it's the organisation that's not the right fit, or maybe it's the situation. But actually, there's more than just your boss who's part of the environment that you work with, and you have to think about building your reputation within that entire environment.
Yeah, I take the point about resilience, and I have my fair few war stories and regroupings and replannings and doing things differently. But I guess we have, in a sense, a bit of a survivorship bias here, in that we've got women who've had the resilience because they've had the smarts, the resources, the luck, the support, something happened. But what we don't have in the room is the ones that weren't able to bounce back from that.
Yeah, and I think that's where what I was talking about in terms of organisational training is really important. You know, we do all have different levels of resilience, and at different times in our lives we have different levels of resilience. And so I think that kind of thing can help, but I also think Nicki's right. You know, you know, I've always got through my career with people around me, and yeah, sometimes those people will help kind of, you know, buoy you up for the bits where you need a bit of a boost. But yeah, there's quite a bit to it, I think, but it's a really important question.
Life's short though, at the end of the day, and if it's really not working and you're unhappy and you've got options, you know, also I think have to stay and soldier on through it, because I think being at work and the people that you work with have a lot to do with how you feel and enjoyment in life, and that's where you can get real energy from having people that you enjoy collaborating with. So finding the right fit for you is important, and if it's really not working, and it's sometimes it might be a better option to look for somewhere else. And then I think it's also important when you do look for jobs, try and find out as much as you can to work out if the team and the people you're going to be working with are a good fit for you. And it is an employee's market. Employers, you know, need to step up their game.
No, I also want to add that actually this is a really good networking opportunity. I was talking to Karen and sorry, what's her name? But and in a previous networking Wāhine in Auckland, because I was in Auckland for 26 years, I just made the move here in Jan for this, so there's a challenge. Beautiful weather. I have to say, but my colleague in my previous organization actually at this event network talked to a couple of people and made that move from this. So networking also helps a lot for you to kind of, you know, have a think. Maybe it's not the right place. Maybe you need to think of, you know, and you actually make good friends.
No, for the record, I'm very happy with my
You're probably speaking for the people.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of past versions of myself, and women who don't have as much leverage in their career that I have now.
Yes.
When you're junior, you have no leverage. So yeah.
One piece of advice: be upfront. You know, rarely managers deliberately want to hurt you or harm you or stop you. Sometimes it's worth having an open discussion. Say, hey, you did this. You know, I think this is how it affected me, you know, even if you didn't mean it. But sometimes, again, you might try that over and over again, and it's not working. And if it's affecting your core and start to make you doubt yourself or whatever, then it's, you know, sometimes it's okay. It's okay to, you know, to move on. It doesn't mean anything, you know, about the wider organization. Or you can always go back if you enjoy, you know, that place when the time is right.
Comment online. We just want to give some space for our audience that are
Yeah. Yeah, I think a great question to follow on is any observations on unconscious bias and ways to address this? Anyone wants to go for that?
Yeah. I think there was a really interesting part of the downstream panel conversation that touched on this topic. And I think, I'm just trying to remember exactly what was said, but I think the challenge, and it might have been Tracy Hickman, but I think what she said was that the challenge is to think about when you're going out to hire someone, you know, not to sort of think about replacing like for like, if you know what I mean. So we have preconceived ideas. We all have them, right? That's the whole point about unconscious bias. But trying to think differently about what you're needing and not replacing someone who leaves with someone who kind of seems to be exactly the same as what you had before. And she made that point generally, I think, but I think for me it speaks to that thing about, well, you often hear who is the right candidate for the role. Well, of course, your version of the right candidate is influenced by what you think, you know. So actually try and have an open mind about what you think the right skills are, and then that will open you up to considering somebody who may not fit the mould. I can think of an example where I hired someone who didn't have the particular qualifications I thought I needed in the role, but turned out to be a much better fit for the role than had I just gone with what I thought the qualifications dictated. So, you know, it's hard to do, but again, that's where maybe talking to other people can help you too. You know, somebody who can kind of challenge and question you a little bit to think about what you really need. Big plug for people and capability business partners there. They're often really good at helping you to think differently, and not just hire the person that you think you know you need.
I think though that ultimately the answer to unconscious bias is a diverse organisation, and if it is a buyer's market right now, you know, that there's lots of opportunity, and if you are genuinely good at what you do and can back yourself, and you may need to be brave and back yourself, but if unconscious bias is a significant problem in the organisation that you're in, go and find another organisation to work in, because I think the choice is there, and I think that I don't think that we should have to put up with it any longer.
Julia, we've got another question online.
Yeah, there's a couple more. This one's particularly for you. Reflecting on your new position as Chief Executive, what would be the most important piece of advice you would give to our emerging Wāhine leaders with us tonight?
It's really hard to narrow it down to the most important thing, but say a few things. I think for me, it has been, I do think genuinely finding people that you can learn from me in my career has been really important. And so, you know, that kind of leadership or mentoring, somebody who you can who can help you learn and help you develop skills, and that builds your confidence, has probably been something that has happened for me in most steps in my career. I think that's probably been quite important. It's not always that easy to find the right person, but when you can't find someone, I think asking and sort of making it clear that you need a bit of help is pretty important. And I think, as Sheila kind of mentioned, the networking is really important. You know, it's surprising how many people you meet and cross paths with that will pop back up in your career at pivotal times. Already tonight, I talked to Bex, who you know, we used to work in the same space, and there are lots of people who you cross paths with, and that can sometimes open up doors and really interesting opportunities for you. And I think that's a really important thing to do as well. So even though it might be hard, it might not be your comfort zone to go along to networking events. And if you find that hard and scary, like, it's harder when you don't know many people, right? It's not easier when you've been doing it longer because you know more people. So that makes it easier. But I think, you know, do try to come to networking events, and if you find it difficult, just ask someone to introduce you to someone else.
Yeah, and then there's a question here. I'm going to try and shorten it. How do senior leaders and executives demonstrate that they actually live the work-life balance, which can be a barrier to Wāhine taking up or applying for senior roles?
Okay. Airihi, you've got it.
And it's really hard, and I confess I've been struggling with it ever since I had kids, trying to be the mother that I want to be to my kids, because, you know, different people want different things. I want to be present. I want to show up at assembly occasionally when they're going to do something, and when I don't, sometimes they remind me forever. And so it's kind of, how do I manage the parent I want to be for them, and also my own personal desire to be involved in something that I find interesting, and that, you know, I think it's about purpose. Work kind of anchors me, and its importance to who I am. So I have always struggled. I think I send late emails, but I should maybe give you the context for that. Is I come in a bit earlier now, but I do school drop-offs every morning. I drop my kids at school. I do sometimes go and see them when I can if they've got something going on. And when I leave work at at 5:30, which I've done, and I've been privileged to have no one's blinked at me ever doing that for all these years. And I go home and then I just focus on my kids. So I, do homework, growl them, chase them around the house, try to get them, all those things. But from like the time I get home to about the time they go to bed, they are my focus. I do try to explain to people, sorry, in advance, I'm going to send late emails, don't expect you to ever do anything, but it's about me trying to juggle my life. So I'm not sure that that's helpful and it's not perfect. I guess the fact is you can do it, but you've got to be really careful around what you're giving up. So it's a personal choice.
Yeah, I used to work for a woman who said, you've got to juggle a whole lot of balls and you've got to know which ones won't break if you drop them. And it kind of speaks to priorities. And, my little piece to add to that, I guess, is that my husband was at home with our kids when they were little. And so, I'm really lucky to be in that position, but it's also meant that he, when he went back to work, he had a much better understanding about the what the roles meant, and so we're pretty 50-50, which helps.
I think having kids and having someone support you is quite important. But to be honest, to my husband's credit, sometimes I didn't want him to do stuff. Like I wanted to be the mother that stayed home with my sick kids. So there's probably sometimes I also didn't want to give him space that he would have happily done, because that's what the role I wanted to play.
Just looked at the time and it's gone away because I've been absorbed and also up my maybe we have one other question, or perhaps it's time for us to wrap up. Are there any more questions from the audience that we'd like to ask?
Yeah, sorry, I did one last one. My name is Karen. It's great to hear from you all. And just to display my name, thank you for my job. But for myself, I sort of fell into the energy industry with no energy related qualification. And so I guess I can't help but in the back of my mind always think like what's that next step going to be? What I'm working on now, the project I'm on now, is it going to be playing in the future? How can I obviously do all the reading, all the research and things of what's going on in the market, but do you have any advice on sort of how to make it easier to take that next step?
Just in case people, I'm not sure how the microphones are, so just in case people online couldn't hear that, and I'll just kind of get to the end, but it was really about how you take the next step in your career. So it's, do we have any advice about how you make that next step, particularly kind of, if you haven't necessarily had a lot of depth of experience in the energy sector? Does anybody want to offer a thought on that?
My thought would be that I think actually some opportunities arise in the most unlikely places, and that you should retain an open mind to those possibilities. I originally came out of the oil and gas sector and didn't intend to go into the electricity sector, for example. So my first foray into the electricity sector was sort of out of sector for me, but haven't regretted it. And there are many other examples I could give during my career of doing things that I thought were not necessarily a logical step, but actually turned out to be really good. So, keep an open mind and look at every opportunity in its widest possible sense. And as Sheila said, don't think that just because you don't have the qualifications for it, that you can't do it.
To end on. All right, so yeah, we did want to sort of close on time. So I just wanted to say a really big thank you to everybody for joining us, both those of you who were able to come into the office here and those of you online. I've really enjoyed it. All really enjoyed it and really pleased to be a part of the Mana Wāhine kaupapa of empowering women and diverse voices in our industry. So really keen to keep that support going and keep the conversation going. I just wanted to leave you with a whakatauki and a small wero challenge. So the whakatauki is kia tēnā, kia tēnā, kia tēnā anō. Tōna ake āhua, tōna ake mauri, tōna ake mana. And that means each and everyone has their own uniqueness, life essence and presence. And my wero is for you all to consider how you might be able to create more inclusive and empowering workspaces for everyone, both as individuals and at an organisational and an industry level. And also to remember this whakatauki that it's only about the āhua, mauri and mana, not only about the āhua, mauri and mana of others, but also about yourself. So thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to hand over to Sina, who's going to close us out with a karakia.
And thank you to our panelists and the rest tonight. Thank you to our guests for joining us. It was awesome to have here in our office and here online as well. Hopefully you can hear me from back down there. I will close out with the karakia now. So, kia whakairea tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, ki tūruki, whakatahi ai, kia tūruki, whakatahi ai, haumie, hui, tai ki. Wonderful. Feel free to grab some kai on your way out. Again, we don't want the time going to waste. Thank you everyone online.